His penicillin will save more lives than war can spend. This was the headline on the 1945 Time magazine cover when Sir Alexander Fleming first invented penicillin and it was ready for use. Let's go back, before the invention of penicillin, when a sport as simple as baseball was deadly. People could simply slide to get to a base but could end up scraping their leg. This could cause a major staphylococcus disease that would not be able to be treated at this time. A scrape would be very deadly and would threaten lives. Dr. Morton Patterson lived during the time of the evolution of penicillin. He wrote a book, and an excerpt from the book was about how penicillin played a major role in his life. He was playing in the street and scraped his knee. He was rushed to the hospital and was diagnosed with osteomyelitis, a disease in the knee. This was before the invention of penicillin, so major actions had to be made, such as surgery. After a long, complicated process was complete, he was all right to go back home.
If you think back to when it was discovered, there are many people who are dying from just simple infections, strep throat, or you get a break in your skin through a fall or something, and you get a staphylococcus or streptococcus infection, and that would progress and it would be life-threatening. So many people died before the discovery of penicillin. So it's hard to imagine life without penicillin.
Several years later, the disease came back to Dr. Morton Patterson, but this was after the invention of penicillin. Penicillin quickly treated the disease and it never came back again. This is just one example on why penicillin really is the miracle drug. Before penicillin, many wars occurred, such as the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and World War I. Sadly, many soldiers died in these wars. However, many less would have if penicillin were to have come out earlier. A quote from sonofthesouth.net states, "Twice as many men died of disease and of gunshot wounds in the Civil War. Dysentery, measles, smallpox, pneumonia, and malaria were the soldiers' greatest enemy." When I woke up just after dawn on September 28, 1928, I certainly didn't plan to revolutionize all medicine by discovering the world's first antibiotic or bacteria killer. Fleming would later say, "But I guess that's exactly what I did." This is what Alexander Fleming had to say after he made one of the most important inventions in history, penicillin.
He was a physician who worked at St. Mary's Hospital in London, and in 1929 he accidentally discovered the penicillin mold. What happened was that he was studying this bacteria, it's called Staphylococcus, and the petri dish that the bacteria was in was contaminated by this mold, and he found out that the Staphylococcus, the bacteria, didn't grow in that petri dish. So he isolated that mold.
Alexander Fleming worked at the St. Mary's Hospital in London from 1928 to 1948 and was researching a disease called Staphylococcus at the time. He had it growing in a petri dish for a couple of days. When Fleming was going to throw it out, he noticed something unusual. There were little patches of mold that the disease was not growing by. Fleming made a smart decision to actually research this. He named this mold Penicillin notatum. This was the miracle drug that saved many people's lives, but it wasn't ready for use just as yet. Alexander Fleming now had the penicillin mold, but still had a lot of work to do. He wouldn't be able to do it himself, so he teamed up with two others to make their medicine. Their names were Howard Florey and Ernest Chain. Together, they needed to isolate the penicillin mold. This means that they needed to get the mold all by itself into the medicine that can be used today. While those three were isolating penicillin, World War I was going on and many deaths were occurring. Sadly, most of these deaths would have been stopped if penicillin was already ready for use. 204,000 people were wounded in World War I. The wounds would open up and be exposed to deadly diseases. The diseases would end up killing the soldier, not the bullet itself.
He isolated the penicillin antibiotic, and subsequently it was found to work by inhibiting bacterial cell wall synthesis. So if the bacteria can't make their cell walls, or the cell walls are weak, they die.
In 1942, penicillin was used for the very first time. Annie Miller, who was 90 years old, was on what everyone thought was her deathbed. The doctors tried everything to cure her disease, which is a streptococci, also known as strep throat. Everything failed, and there was pretty much no hope. However, one doctor decided to use an unknown drug at that time called penicillin. It was used on her and miraculously cured her. Annie Miller was the first ever patient that had been treated by penicillin, and it was successful.
Penicillin is prescribed by many physicians. It's used to treat many conditions from like conditions such as strep throat. It's used for treating pneumonias. It's used to treat meningitis as well as other conditions.
Penicillin was introduced to the world and put to the test immediately in World War II. It came out in the middle of World War II and was made and distributed in very large amounts all across the world. Doctors carried the medicine and cured people on the battlefield using penicillin. Since penicillin was a living mold, it needed to be with sugar because that is what the molds ate. After it was distributed, it was sterilized again by getting heated. Penicillin did make a difference. For America, 18% of the people who got pneumonia died in World War I before penicillin. But after penicillin in World War II, less than 1% of the people who got pneumonia died. That's amazing, especially because 4 times as many people fought in World War II than in World War I. In 1945, Fleming, Chain, and Florey were all rewarded for their very hard work. They were awarded the 1945 Nobel Prize in Medicine. After a long, hard process was complete, the accidental discovery was a big success and continues to save lives today. Some other antibiotics that are used today are derived from penicillin as well. But the problem is, penicillin is used so much on so many people, some bacteria are becoming immune to penicillin. MRSA is just one example. It stands for methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. The M and the R stand for methicillin-resistant, which means penicillin is not effective to kill this form of Staphylococcus. People misuse dosage and duration of antibiotics, and thus creates these superbugs.
The problem has been that these bacteria are getting smart. So there's a lot of bacteria that become resistant to penicillin. So it's very important that you treat appropriately and don't overuse these antibiotics.
In conclusion, the accidental discovery of penicillin was a very big success. Many easy, curable diseases that we experience in our everyday lives were major ordeals in the past. The story of Dr. Morton Patterson showed you how much more convenient life is with penicillin from the medical aspect. Penicillin decreased the number of deaths of soldiers who have fought in numerous wars. From Annie Miller, the first patient who was treated with penicillin, until today, penicillin has saved many lives and will continue to in the future.